What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be a better human? What do you think? We'll explore these very questions in this episode. Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 128 of Did You Bring the Hummus podcast. I'm Kimberly, your host, and I'm super excited to be here with you today. Did You Bring the Hummus is a podcast for all things vegan. Before we get started, I have one very important question for you. Did you bring the hummus? Today, I am joined by John Sanbonmatsu, professor of philosophy at Worcester Polytechnic Institute in Massachusetts, where he teaches courses in ethics, political theory, existentialism, philosophy of technology, and other topics. He is the author of The Omnivore's Deception, What We Get Wrong About Meat, Animals, and Ourselves, and of The Postmodern Prince, Critical Theory, Left Strategy, and the Making of a New Political Subject, as well as editor of the book Critical Theory and Animal Liberation. He is also the creator of the Clean Meat Hoax website, which takes a skeptical view of cellular or cultivated meat products. Professor Sanbonmatsu's writing has appeared in Christian Science Monitor, Counterpunch, Huffington Post, and St. Louis Post-Dispatch. One of the threads that you'll find throughout this episode, and that I really loved exploring, is the concept to be. What does it mean? Like I said at the start, to be human. What does it mean to be a better human? Let's find out. Welcome, John. I'm so excited to chat with you tonight.
Same here, Kimberly. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining me. So we start every single episode. I always say we because I feel like the listeners are like here with me even now. I start every episode by asking my guest about their vegan journey. Why don't you share yours with us?
Sure. Well, I mean, ostensibly, it was reading Peter Singer's book, Animal Liberation. And when I was in college, I just stumbled across his book in a bookstore in Amherst, Massachusetts, and I read it. I'd already encountered his work in a philosophy class, and that convinced me at the time to become vegetarian. And then after that, a few years later, maybe 3 years later, I think, I became a vegan. So that was almost, next year it'll be, or is it this year? I think this year, 40 years of being vegan. So
Yay.
wow, thank you.
Yeah.
But when people ask me that about my vegan journey, whatever, I really think it was how I was. I think it was being brought up with living with cats and dogs, and being in a family that, although not vegetarian, respected animals around in our environment and stuff like that. So I think that helped sensitize me to the personhood of other beings. So I think that I had a basis already before I read that particular book to be receptive, to the idea.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense to me. I feel the same way about my journey. And I went vegetarian because of an issue of PETA's Animal Times. However, the first book I read after going vegetarian was Peter Singer's Animal Liberation.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
In my book, I do criticize Peter Singer's work now, but it's no question, it's a very strong book, and it's been hugely influential and done a lot of good.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's what philosophers do, right?
Yes.
You have to dig in and you have to have thoughts about things. That's kind of the whole purpose.
Yes. And then everyone attacks you. That's also
right.
I mean, look at Socrates. Not only didn't they like what he had to say, they made him drink the poison hemlock because he was being a pain in the neck. So at least that hasn't happened to me yet. Thank God.
Thank goodness, huh?
Thank goodness. Yeah.
That is, I also resonate with your story about the way you grew up with a family that, surrounded by cats and dogs. We didn't live with any cats growing up. My parents are solely dog people. They like my cats who live here with me, but they're not interested in living their own lives with cats. But anyway, I grew up where like our dog was our brother, like my parents
Yeah.
called him our brother, go take your brother for a walk, like all those things. It was always kind of like that. But we were not vegetarian either. But
Yeah.
I feel like when I look back over the course of my whole life, that I was just destined to be vegan. And it was just a
Mm,
matter of time before
mm.
something came in my path that showed me that that was an option.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because as you're pointing out, I mean, there's so many people with that experience, and but they think of veganism as some kind of cult,
Yeah.
you know, or you have to be some kind of special lunatic or whatever. But no, it's simply building on those insights that we gained living with companion animals to realize that, well, all animals are just as special and
Yeah.
have something going on, and they're emotionally complex and interesting and worth getting to know rather than to aggress against or whatever, have
Hmm.
dominate relations of
Yeah.
domination against. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. There's a whole thing. That word dominion is thrown around so much when speaking with people who
Right.
are arguing against veganism and are leaning on a religious idea. Whether or not, it's interesting, whether or not they're actually religious, they've just like
Right.
heard that there's
Yeah.
this section of a book that talks about
Right. Right.
dominion
Right.
without like
Exactly.
wondering what does it actually mean, digging into it. I kind of
No. Yeah. No.
things don't
Well,
always
and
change.
I'm sure, you know this as someone who's been working in this area for a long time, that people who don't want to examine their complicity in the system of violence will reach for any excuse at
Mhm.
hand. And once you explain, well, actually, plants aren't conscious and sentient, so you can't say, what about plants? Then they'll say, well, etc. So there's
Mhm.
like a whole lineup of bad arguments that meat eaters have. And I know them because I was a meat eater, right? It's not like we don't understand
Mhm.
it's what that's about, but it's an ideology and it can be, deconstructed as an ideology.
Right. And I think because so many people grow up with that ideology just part of their life, that's what they do, it's what their family does. They don't realize that it can be questioned. And then when someone outside of that who has also maybe grown up in that same kind of situation but then was exposed to something, showed them that veganism is a real viable option, a different way of living, then like your whole world kind of crashes down almost, I think, for some people. And some people will see that and go, okay, I'm curious and I want to know what this means. I didn't know there was another way to be. And others put that wall up and they start with all those excuses, like you were saying. From a philosopher's perspective, like what is your take on that?
Well, it's interesting. You just used the verb to be,
Mm.
like there might be another way to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's existential, right? It's not like when people think about the animal question or meat eating, they think it's a lifestyle choice or it's about your diet, whatever. But no, it's a different way of being human. It
Mm-hmm.
really is, because you see the world in its proper light, which is to say you see that there's this systemic violence, this systemic injustice, and it makes you go crazy because you think, how can this? I can feel it. I feel the suffering there of all of these beings that we're killing. And what? So you begin to think it's like being gaslighted. It's like, well, I must be the problem because everyone else thinks this is normal.
Mm-hmm.
So in my work, and I think all of us, we're looking for a new conception of human existence. So it's a big ask in a certain sense, because it's not a superficial change. I mean, everything we do is organized around human supremacy. It's another way to think about it, right? People just chop down forests to build highways, or uh, put out poison for the mice under their stairs, or they don't. We're all kind of trained from birth to see the world from a human point of view, and to be concerned only about human life and human needs and human interests. But there's a better way to be human, and that's, I think, what I try to emphasize in my work. Philosophically, it's not just, it is unethical what we're doing,
Mm-hmm.
But I really think sometimes that the system is so vast, the system of violence against animals is so vast that it really throws into question the very basis of human moral life. Because whatever else we do on a day-to-day basis, being nice to this person or that person, or being concerned about social justice, if we're not seeing or attending to the most important justice issue of our time, then we can't really call ourselves good people, I think.
Mhm. Yeah. Wow.
I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah.
It does, yeah. And I'm fully in. I agree with that. I've there's two. I've got like two different things I want to say. So the first thing is just today, uh, thinking about people being this violence against animals, seeing this human supremacy. And then also, I had the thought about how certain animals are more important to us than others. And the example that I witnessed just today was I was driving to the library. And while I was doing that, a couple was walking their dog on the side of the road. And I see that the dog is off the leash, which they shouldn't be. Like, there's rules here about that. And then I notice that the dog is chasing a squirrel. And the couple are laughing about it.
Yep.
Yeah. Horrific.
Right.
Thankfully, the dog didn't catch the squirrel, so the squirrel got away. But
Yeah, I'm sure you've seen similar things. I mean, I've seen that all my life, right? Like if I'm at the beach, it's so common to see little kids being encouraged by their parents to chase the seagulls,
yeah,
or yeah, to sick the dogs on geese like at my pond here. It's insanity. But I mean, it does reveal something really important, which is a kind of sadism underlying our relations with other animals, like a will to violence, a will to to see them harmed. And even if the couple didn't think the dog would catch the squirrels, the point is they can't empathize with. That's your point, right? That they can't empathize with the squirrels' terror,
right.
and bodily risk. Because so this is a problem with companion animals. I don't mean that I'm not getting into whether we should have cats and dogs or not. We could, but that's not my point. My point is that the way we fetishize cats and dogs as special is a kind of it's kind of our own species narcissism. They're special because we love them.
Yeah.
That's what makes them special, as opposed to the squirrel is just as special, has just as much integrity of consciousness as my cat does. You know what I mean? And so it requires a gestalt switch, really like a paradigm switch to begin to see even small creatures like insects and vertebrates as having consciousness, which they do. I mean, I read a scholarly article about how ants have more ways of navigating their environment than humans do.
Wow.
I mean, yeah, technologically unaided. That is, they don't have GPS, but apparently they count the numbers of steps. They navigate by polarized light, and I can't even remember. It's crazy but because they're tiny. By the way, I was just rereading the Dr. Seuss book, when Horton Hears a Who. If you know that book, right?
Yeah.
And that was another thing when I think about like how I got to where I am today. Even little things like that, where he was actually talking about, that was an allegory for Japan in the post-war environment. But it's about attending to the subjectivity of beings who normally would pass our attention by. Anyway, I'm just rambling here, but I think that ultimately what we're talking about isn't just veganism, right? It's really a different way of being human. It's a different way of understanding who we are on this planet and not seeing ourselves as the lords and masters of creation.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, you're right, because there are people who are vegan, and this perfectly segues into the next thought that you triggered earlier. Is there are people who are vegan, and that's like what they do, it's how they live. And then there's those of us who use that word because it's the easiest way to capture and for people to understand what it means. And it's who we are. So going back to that to be, what we are
Yeah.
being is like fully embodying this idea that we exist here with others, not for others, not to rule others, and to have this like cohesive environment where we're all kind of, I don't know, working together, living together, like just this idea that what it made me think of, I think I'm all over the place. I gotta find my way back. Is that there are these animal only vegans, and then there's the like intersectional vegans. And the animal only vegans are like, fuck people, I hate humans, we should all die. Animals are the only thing that matters.
Gary
And
Uralski, maybe someone.
uh-huh. Yeah.
Just not to name names, but okay.
Right. Yes, and his whole following of cis het white men
Yeah,
and
right.
all that. But but yeah, this idea that so now it's like just about the animals, but like how can they not see the connection? So we are so violent towards animals and we are so violent towards each other. Like is that the baseline of what humans are just these violent creations that are just here to destroy?
Right.
Or are we able to kind of find this compassion and, I don't know, kindness, or even just a moral baseline of understanding that it's all connected? Being violent towards animals makes us violent towards people. Being violent towards other people makes us violent towards animals. Because, like, if you can do something horrific to someone who is shaped like you, who makes sounds like you do,
Yeah.
what are you then capable of if you're viewing someone who isn't shaped like you, who doesn't make sounds like you? Like what are you capable of doing to them? I don't know. It just seems like that we're missing something when we're not looking at the whole picture and the violence behind it, and not looking really kind of from a maybe even from a philosopher's perspective of this idea of how to better be in the world.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think you're speaking to the holistic nature of society and what what's called intersectionality, but it's also a totality of different forms of oppression that, as you're saying, are they're interconnected and mutually reinforcing. So if you don't, like, I don't understand how someone can talk about veganism or animal rights without understanding patriarchy or capitalism. Like hello, like what
Yeah.
what are you not getting there? I mean, it's not an accident that like the same week that Stephen Miller at the White House is saying that we live in the law of the jungle and the powerful are meant to dominate the weak and to take what they want. He literally says that as the rule. And Trump today was interviewed in the Times saying that he doesn't believe in international law, just he follows his own morality. So the same week you have that, you have RFK Jr.'s promoting a heavier meat-based diet.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a kind of ideological coherence to the side that says domination, humiliation of the vulnerable, killing of the weak.
Mm-hmm.
That there is a kind of consistency to that position, and it's inimical to life on Earth. I mean, it's causing such suffering across the board for vulnerable communities and our, immigrant communities in the U.S., vulnerable communities in Gaza and Sudan and elsewhere. So it's again, so when we talk about a new way of being on the planet, it isn't just being in ecological harmony with the other beings, but like to stop the wars that we're waging, this whole cult of masculine aggression and
Mm-hmm.
etc. Like it's a package. How can you? I think it's intellectually dishonest to deny it, okay?
Yeah.
And it's politically unhelpful because you can't promote animals on this side and then support Jordan Peterson on the other side. It's, or whoever from Andrew Tate.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
So anyway, well, we need to cleanse after that. Yeah.
I think so.
Sorry.
Ugh.
Oh no, I don't know, Kimberly. You've lost all the Andrew Tate people now.
Oh,
I don't know.
shucks.
Your podcast. You're going to shed so many numbers now.
Right. Yeah. I for sure have a lot of his followers checking
Yeah,
out my content.
sure.
So, John, you have this book out called The Omnivore's Deception. What was the inspiration for that?
Well, I think honestly, the title of the book is meant to resonate with Michael Pollan's huge bestseller, 2006, now the 20th anniversary, The Omnivore's Dilemma: A Natural History of Four Meals. And I remember a friend of mine was reading it, and I knew almost intuitively that this book was going to be bad news for veganism, for animals, for justice. And my friend said, "No, no, I think he's an ally." And I'm like, I just know that's not true. But it took me 20 years, right, to come up with an answer. I mean, I didn't decide, sit down 20 years ago and say, well, I want to write a book about this. But I think it had been percolating because I've been reading the New York Times since high school. So for 40 years or something, every day I get the paper delivered. And what I'd seen since, the early 2000s is just article after article after article promoting uh, do-it-yourself slaughter, deer hunting, quote, humane meat, this cult of women who have been leaving their jobs, well-paying jobs in some cases, to go and buy ranches or go hunting as a way to achieve what they call empowerment. And so all of this stuff I'd been observing and thinking about, and then eventually I ended up writing about it. But the book was, I think it took me a long time to write because I really wanted to, it's not just a critique of pollen or the humane meat people. I'm really trying to name, the mass violence and the self-deception
Mm.
that's involved in the meat economy, right? So there are three kinds of deception I kind of talk about in the book. One is the meat industry, dairy, eggs, right? We were all propagandized to think that we need this stuff, that it's healthy for us, it's good for the animals. Then there's this other deception, which is practiced by Barbara Kingsolver, Temple Grandin, Michael Pollan, and all these other people who say, oh, well, we can have a not kind, gentle form of agriculture. This one is bad, but then there's the good kind where the animals go to their deaths uncomplainingly. We slit their throats and it's only one bad day, and da, da, da.
Mm.
And then the other form of deception is really self-deception, or what the philosopher Sartre called bad faith, Jean-Paul Sartre. And in bad faith, we simply lie to ourselves.
Mm.
Maybe not, those of us who've become vegan, but that we're raised to think that animals don't matter, that raising and killing them is, quote, natural. We're just acting like other animals. It's a predatorial relationship, etc. So I honestly, I say this in my introduction to the book. I don't think that the problem is lack of good moral theories. Okay. I mean, Pythagoras was one of the first people 3,000 years ago, almost, to say, uh, we should stop eating animals. So, and then there've been many theories and philosophers under the bridge since then. Okay. It's not that we don't have good arguments. I've yet to hear one compelling argument, one in favor of enacting mass violence against defenseless beings on this planet. I've never heard one. And I've read, I look for them. Okay, it's not a question of rationality. It's not a question of, oh, well, if we only had that one good argument, that's not what it's about. It's about power. It's about, in some cases, a kind of lust for violence. So, for example, in Pollan's book, he goes out of his way to kill animals with his own bare hands so that he can write about it. He goes to Joel Salatin's Polyface Farms and he kills chickens by God knows, dozens or something. He goes out with some hunters and shoots a mother pig, probably leaving her piglets to starve in a forest. And he describes himself in these like toxic masculine terms as wearing a shit-eating grin, I think is the term he uses. So I think that that's something that the more I thought about it, it became more and more clear. It isn't simply that people are ignorant about what's happening. It isn't just they don't realize there's a better way. It's also that they're invested in a kind of supremacy, really. I mean, and they're not willing to re-examine that. So that was why I came at the problem the way I did in my book.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I think that really gives the listeners a good insight into what to expect when they definitely pick it up after listening to this interview.
Let's hope.
um, yeah, this supremacy thing really is. I think it's so much more in our face right now too, because we see it here in the U.S. for sure, with white supremacy and the
Right.
people in charge and the things that they say and they do, and then what they've emboldened the people who are following them to say and do. And yeah, yeah, and then we're like, I'm struggling, I guess, as someone who, does a podcast, and some of my listeners are vegan, but I have many listeners who are curious about it. Or like came across it because of the name and thought this is about food, but thinking all the foods, and so they stayed because they're kind of curious now. So, as someone who's kind of in a position to try to inspire people to make a change, to
Yeah.
be someone different, and then I look around at the country I live in,
Yeah.
and it feels like, I don't know, like, is it even possible? Because when you look at how much joy people seem to get out of being cruel,
Mhm.
I I don't know.
Well, I think it's very depressing and very sobering, but I also think I'm a big believer in us facing hard truths squarely, right? And
Hmm.
the fact is, we've known for a long time, no spoiler alert, right, that humans can be incredibly savage and cruel to one another. The nearest equivalent to what we're seeing now, as you know, is the period in the 1930s, 1940s in Europe when Germany and Italy and Spain became fascist. And people at that time they were caught unawares in many cases. They didn't take Hitler seriously. They thought he was kind of a buffoon, and it was hard to believe that they were serious when they would say the crazy things they said, but they were very much in earnest.
Mm.
And it wasn't simply that Hitler, say, was a dictator, which he was, of course, and created terror, but he had many followers. So we understand that, there are whole books on the mass psychology of fascism, right? And there aren't as many books on the mass psychology of our fascism towards other beings,
Mm.
but it really is there. I mean, think about these cities and towns and counties that organize like the pigeon hunt and pigeon shooting in Higgins, Pennsylvania, or um, squirrel like there's little rural towns around the country where they have a day to kill squirrels. They just like create this,
Mm.
yeah, they just invite kids to get out there with their 22s and just murder as many squirrels as they can, just as a sport. Uh, in the billion-dollar sport fishing industry, right? It's
Yeah.
all blood sports, and it's odd that even that term, no one minds it. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just, and millions of Americans are hunters. Millions. They go out and they kill for pleasure, whatever they say, And I understand, people in rural communities may be food insecure and so forth, but they're able to afford other things like streaming videos and
Hmm.
whatever other consumer goods. So it isn't the case that they have to, I think in
Right.
99% of cases, whatever, go out and hurt some being. But that it's all, again, it's getting back to the intersectional point you made. I mean, it's all tied in with especially masculinity. And oh my gosh, I was just here in Worcester, Massachusetts. I was at a car rental place a couple weeks ago, and there was this young man there, probably in his mid 20s, late 20s, I don't know. And he was wearing a holiday shirt, a holiday sweater. I mean, it looked like it was like almost hand crocheted. It wasn't, but it
Hmm.
looked like that. And
Hmm.
had those big snowflakes. And it says, "I'm dreaming of a white-tailed deer."
Oh,
and it had a deer in a gun sight.
yikes.
So that's the holiday season for the
Yeah.
hunter. I'm going to go and get me some, you know. So I don't know what it will take. I share your grief at the situation. It's overwhelming. And again, I brought up fascism, the classical fascist period, for a reason. It's that, I mean, yeah, people didn't survive that. I mean, I don't just mean that they were sent to concentration camps. Some of them committed suicide. Some of them emigrated. Uh, and it's terrifying what's going on. But it's up to folks who are committed to truth and justice, as banal as that sounds, to organize
Hmm.
ourselves and to resist it with everything. And right, that's what you're doing in your podcast.
Yeah. And what you're doing with your book and your
Trying,
work.
yes.
Yeah.
Trying to, yes, we're all
Yeah.
trying.
Yeah. um, and let me know if you don't want to talk about this, but I saw it in your bio and on your website. The clean meat hoax. Do you want to
Hmm.
talk about that? This
Sure.
like, so just quickly, my thought, and I don't know a lot about this whole
Yeah.
food tech type thing. Very like because I'm not really into it, but I'm starting to learn because I feel like I need to know about it. Uh, but it like I don't like it based on what I've learned so far.
Yeah.
And so when I saw the title of your website, I was like, okay, I got to dig into this. But can you tell me like what is it? Tell the listeners
Yeah.
what is that, and we'll go
Sure.
from there. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. So it's www.cleanmeat-hoax.com. And how it came about is my friend Karen Davis, my late friend Karen Davis, who ran United Poultry Concerns,
Mhm.
which is a great nonprofit that defends chickens. She had approached me, this is some years ago, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, about what I thought of synthesized or cultivated meat. So this is where you take cells from an actual living animal and then you create like in a biovat, create environmental conditions where they can multiply and grow. And there's a scaffold that gets created so you can engineer
Mm,
flesh that can then be consumed, and you don't have to kill animals for it, right? Although depending on the research that's or how the company's doing building their growth medium, it can actually involve indirectly or directly
mm,
slaughterhouse products, like um, the blood from fetal calves and things like that. But leaving that aside, okay, the utopian dream, right, is that people in the future won't be having meat from animals, living animals. They will just buy chicken or fish or steak that tastes like the real thing because at a molecular level, it is the same thing.
mm,
Um, so that's what's sold to the public and in particular to the animal advocacy movement. So I didn't know anything about it. So I looked into it, and the more I looked into it, the worse it became because the people who are promoting this are venture capitalists who want to make a ton of money on it.
mm,
So they're lying to the public. I think it's a grand deception and they're lying to their investors, these companies that are trying to raise money. Um, and they're lying to the movement by saying this is the Hail Mary pass. Everyone's frustrated because the number of animals being killed is increasing. Per capita meat consumption has been increasing in the last, 6 years or something. So people want to have some hope. So they think, oh, well, this is the thing. But let's just roll this back. The reason people are eating animals and eggs and dairy is not because there aren't good alternatives that are delicious and wonderful. So that is not the issue. If the strategy is, well, we're going to make it easier for them to transition, from the point of view of the consumer, if you don't give a damn about the animals in the first place, why are you going to buy this new product? Which, by the way, there's a lot of research that suggests increasingly that it's just not scalable. I mean,
mm,
even the most ambitious estimates of production of cellular meat would represent, I can't remember, 1/100th of 1% of global meat production in 20 years. It's just a non-starter. It's just not going to work. And Joe Fassler wrote some great articles about this. It's you would just to have the biovats, these stainless steel bacterial resistant environments to grow the meat in, you would need like I can't. It's like millions of tons of steel and glass, and I mean, just as an engineering, the scale of the thing is just incomprehensible, and it requires enormous energy
Mm.
to for all of that stuff. So even in the best case scenario, okay, it's going to be hugely consumed. It's going to consume a huge amount of resources, water, electricity, and then at the end of the day, who's going to buy it? You know,
Right.
no one, there's no huge, the only people who are really excited about it are vegans who aren't going to eat it.
Hmm.
So, you know what I mean? So if I thought that this had the potential to make a difference, a real difference, then I might support it. But the last thing I'll say is the worst, and you'll find this on the cleanmeathoax.com website, is in a way the worst thing about it is the misrepresentation that we find in the industry. They consistently de-emphasize the ethics.
Hmm.
They talk about how this is a healthier thing and this is better for the environment and all this stuff. So it's reinforcing this idea that actually the animals don't matter. In fact, Bruce Friedrich, who is the head of the Good Food Institute and is promoting this stuff, has said, he wrote an op-ed, he was interviewed in the New York Times, he's saying, we're trying to take ethics off the table.
Oof.
Well, yes, literally, he said that. So if the problem is that humans, we're getting back to the existential question, if the problem really is that humans are in this position as a dominating relationship or a relation of domination vis-a-vis the other beings of the world, if that is the problem, I think that is the problem, you know, mostly, then how is it helping matters to say to the consumer, you don't have to care about animals, just have this product because it's better for you.
Hmm.
It's just it's reinforcing the problem, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's
Yeah.
in a nutshell. But
Okay.
I just want to say that that website is a cooperative venture between myself and about a dozen other scholar activists. So you can see a lot of people contributed to that website.
Awesome. Um, the idea that it could possibly be better for the environment seems quite absurd, but I guess they're saying lots of things that aren't actually true about it.
Well, it is, yeah, probably it may be marginally or I can't say. It might be better for the environment than the animal system, because the animal
Mm.
system is literally destroying the means
Yes.
of life on this planet,
Yeah.
like absolutely the most destructive force on the earth.
Hmm.
But it isn't nearly as ecologically benign as veganic
Right.
agriculture. They admit that, you know, that the if you want to have the most efficient, healthiest, most environmentally friendly way to have humans on this planet, it's a plant-based diet. All the science shows that
Yeah.
pretty much. So, you know,
Right. So it just comes back to how can I make a shitload of money off of a
yeah,
thing
exactly.
that are going
That's
to
right.
make convince people that it's better. And then also speaking of money, who can afford something like that? Like how much is this going to cost?
Well,
Like you know.
the thinking is that they will that once it becomes efficient and so forth, and it's at scale, it will be able to compete or in the ideal projections of their brochures and their slide decks they give to their investors, that will be cheaper
Mm,
even than conventionally farmed flesh, right? So if you're at the supermarket and you can buy the Purdue chicken for, I don't even know what that goes for, $2 a pound or whatever. And the synthesized one that tastes just as good and might even be a little bit better for the environment, and it's $1.50 a pound, then maybe people will do that. But
right.
again, they have to have a reason. I mean, economics is not going to be enough. For one thing, there's no evidence that it ever will outcompete the conventional stuff because, as you know, the animal industry is subsidized massively by the federal government,
Right.
right? And there's no federal funding to subsidize, these
Yeah.
experiments in cellular meats. So it's a fantasy to think that anytime soon in the coming
Hmm.
decades, it's going to outcompete cheap beef and pig, pork and so forth.
Yeah. It also made me think of there was a sitcom on probably like 2008, maybe. I don't know exactly, but it was called Better Off Ted. And
Hmm.
they had scientists. It was like a kind of like a development company, and they were always like working on new things. And in each of the episodes, there would always be a commercial for the company. It was called Viridian Dynamics, and it was like, Viridian Dynamics, we make your radishes so spicy you couldn't even eat them, but we wouldn't do that because you couldn't eat them. And so, like little things like that. And in one episode, they try to create cultured meat, and they realize they're having so much trouble. Why does this taste so bad? Why is it so weird? And they came to the idea that because it's being grown in a petri dish, and like this is a sitcom, right? So we're not going to take this seriously, but but it's grown in a petri dish. That means it's not moving. When you're eating mussels from a cow, they've been, moving around, whether it's in this tiny space on their feedlot or like through the grass and like whatever. But in those farms that people think exist, uh, but so they develop a machine to massage the meat, move the meat around so that it can get, but then they overdo it. Now it's too tough. And it's a whole thing. And as you were describing these giant vats that they have to create in this whole like sciency laboratory type thing, that's what I'm seeing in my head. And it just seems kind of silly when we have plants.
It's a kind of mass psychosis, to be honest. I mean, that's actually a thing about what you were just saying. The mussels are not going to taste like regular
Mm-hmm.
mussels because they have to exercise them some way, electronically or electrically. I mean, and so it's a really circuitous way to go about the problem of getting nutrition into human bodies, and it makes no sense, but it does make sense in an uber capitalist high tech culture that where we fetishize the machine and we look for quick technological fixes because rather than doing the hard work of looking at economics, social stratification, power dynamics, identity, and I understand that those are big ticket items, but my friends, look at what's happening to the earth. It's literally being demolished as we speak. Democracy is now, I mean, people who study political theorists, I've heard people point out that, look, democracy was an interesting experiment, liberal capitalist democracy, but if you look historically over the thousands of years of human societies, it's a little blip. And it does seem like it's now being going the way of the horse and carriage. I mean, so it's an all hands on deck kind of emergency ecologically, economically, politically, and of course ethically. And so um, there are no quick fixes for this problem, and I think it does such a disservice to the public and to animal advocates when people go around saying this is the solution. It isn't. It's
Right.
not.
Yeah. Hmm. So what do we do? Like what's the best way for people like you and me who don't have the millions of dollars to be in front of people? I don't know, maybe you do and you're just hiding. I don't know, but I
Yeah,
definitely don't.
I'm secretly rich. Yeah, even
As
for I've
philosophers
hidden
typically are.
I've hidden it from myself even. Yeah. That's how secret it is. Um, yeah, so my first book was called The Postmodern Prince, and this was out of my dissertation research. And I was really looking at the crisis of left intellectual thought and why it seemed to me, I went to grad school in the 1990s, and I went back to school partly because I just felt like, and how does one change society anymore, right? Because it just seemed like everything was getting worse and worse.
Mhm.
No matter how many protests I marched around in, no matter how many letters to the editor I wrote, and right, I mean, and it's hard, I think, for anybody who is seeing what's happening. And half of Americans are pretty appalled at what's happening in this country, honestly, right? And yet, how do we stop it?
Right.
And look at the international situation. How do we stop any of these atrocities? And I think it really should humble us, first of all. And it gets back to what we've been talking about in this conversation about, what it means to be human and other possibilities, right? Other ways of being human. We have to really get off our stop these pretensions we have that we know we're the noble beings and we know what's best for the earth, and we're the only moral beings on the earth and the only ones with any dignity. It's like, whoa, get over yourself. Take a quick look at the fact that you have I'm talking to the human race. Listen,
Hmm.
no viable international institutions for intervening against genocide, inequality, mass starvation, the emptying of our oceans of conscious life. I mean, all of the marine animals are being killed in
Hmm.
the trillions. I was shocked. I just learned how many shrimp are killed each year. I had no idea. I read a study that it's estimated to be the number to be 25 to 65 trillion, which would make
Whoa.
shrimp the most um, uh, the animal, killing the greatest numbers. So at any rate, yeah, that it's a really daunting question, Kimberly. I was hoping that in coming on your podcast, you would have the answer. I see
Well, I
you don't.
appreciate that.
Yeah, but in my first book, what I argue is that we need a a mass movement that pulls together all of these many other movements, right? We can't get at this through single issue politics, like
Right.
just to talk about animal rights and not to understand the how the animal system is being propagated by capitalism.
Mhm.
This is the other thing too, right? The people, Bruce Friedrich and these people who have Good Food Institute, they really believe that capitalism is a kind of savior to animals. I'm like, what are you talking about? Just
Yeah.
look at the last 500 years of capitalism and get back to me.
Mhm.
So we need a movement that can tackle all of these different issues at once, and develop a consciousness where feminists understand why animals should matter. Animal rights people should understand why white supremacy isn't good for anybody. It's certainly not good for people of color, and it isn't good for animals either.
Yeah.
But I think that's what the work that needs to be done. But could go on all day about the obstacles. There are a lot of obstacles in the way of that.
Yeah. That's true.
So
So,
yeah.
yeah.
Just the new year. This is where we roll out our plan for
Yeah.
world revolution.
Exactly. Yes. That's what that really that fires me up, right? When I think about yes, this revolution and we can do that. And if we can come together, another thing I've heard from these like animal onlys, animal rights people is the idea that it's okay to be single issues because there's no oh, I just totally lost my train of thought. Because the other groups, they don't participate in ours without ever actually trying to engage with other groups to say, can we work together? We can't, nobody's free when everyone isn't free. And it's like this idea that the oppression is somehow different and isn't meaningful for one when we find it meaningful for another.
It's so short-sighted. I mean, and that is not to minimize the hostility on the left as well as the right towards animal
Mm-hmm.
liberation issues. It's really there, and I think it's a huge problem. But there's if you if you begin to understand this issue as a systemic issue, then you have to then and look, the animal advocacy movement is a tiny little group. I mean, animal rights issues do not appear, as far as I know, on the top 50 top concerns of Americans. So it's not like it's something that people think about or care about. They don't even care. They don't even know that they don't care about the fact that we're in a mass extinction crisis, which is
Right.
the most important issue, actually, other than the violence that we're inflicting. That is the most important issue of our time, bigger than global warming, even. No one talks about it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not going to help us in the long run to isolate ourselves. And for example, when DXE, Direct Action Everywhere, there were some activists who went up on stage at a Bernie Sanders
Mm-hmm.
rally back in 2015 I think it was 2015. It was during one of these election cycles and disrupted. It was 2015 or 19. Uh, I think I think the women were topless and was trying to draw attention to the exploitation of dairy cows.
Hmm.
Like there's a time and a place for everything. And when you've got, the one leftist candidate who's already embattled, and you want to have people respect you as a movement, including people on the left, all
Hmm.
you're doing, right, is playing into the hands of a kind of stereotype about lunatics. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
yeah. So and I feel the same way, by the way, when the Extinction Rebellion people, throw mustard on Van Gogh or something. Like they're
Mhm.
better more appropriate targets than, the great masters.
Right.
Not there's that saying that any publicity is good publicity, but I don't believe it because we want to represent ourselves as leaders of society, right? Antonio Gramsci was a political theorist that I write about in my work. Gramsci described really revolutionary struggle as, quote, moral and intellectual leadership. It's not about manipulating people. It isn't about telling them what they want to hear. It's about showing them how the world works, really explaining to them, educating them. A
Hmm.
movement has to be educative, but it also has to have enough moral dignity that people will respect it, right? I mean, even look at Martin Luther King. I mean, I hate to say that, but the SCLC and so forth, um, they were reviled by many whites, most whites, for a while there, right? For years. Now we have a holiday after King,
Right.
but the reason that he's respected is because the civil rights movement was because they sacrificed themselves. They put their bodies at risk. They were beaten
Hmm.
up and bricks were thrown at them. They were murdered. They were thrown in jail and fire hose. That's a dignified kind of resistance, and
Yeah.
we might need to model that. I think.
Yeah. I think so too. Yeah. It's scary as that is for probably most of us to think about what people before us have endured to make that kind of change. But yeah, it is meaningful, and I think it's something that we maybe need to be considering. Yeah. Just one more point before I get to my last question. I cannot believe how quickly this hour is going by. um,
Yes,
because-
well, there's much to talk about.
yes, for sure. Recently, the Maha movement, and I'm not even going to talk about the change in the guidelines that was
Yeah,
put out this week, but
right.
they're talking about, we need to end animal testing. And yes, we do. That statement is correct.
Right.
However, the fact that there are animal rights people being like, this is fantastic. We've been waiting for this. I mean, I guess I can bring up the guidelines because now, sure, they want us to stop testing on certain animals. Fully behind us not doing that. But the guidelines are all about eating more animal products and using butter and beef tallow and still with the scary seed oils and so it's almost like, I mean, the billions of animals are killed every year for like 5 minutes worth of some taste and some supposed nutrition that people think they can't get somewhere else. And because there might do this one, it goes back to that saying, like, a broken clock can be right twice a day. So yes, making a statement like, we need to look at animal testing, we need to see where we can end it. Yeah, but to like throw yourself behind a movement like this, I don't
No,
know.
I mean it's like saying, well, we shouldn't be in favor of the Nazi Party because they're pro animal welfare, which they were. The Nazis enacted some of the most quote progressive animal welfare laws in German history. But of course, it wasn't abolitionist. It was basically the way, it's like, well, we're going to kill them kindly and this sort of thing. But
Yeah.
no, it would have been a mistake in that context to say, oh, well, yeah, we'll give Hitler and the Nazis a pass because they're pro-animal. Like, what are you talking about? Again, it's
Yeah.
robbing Peter to pay Paul. So I'd be interested to hear some of these activists and organizations who were originally excited that RFK Jr., was going to be heading up health because, yeah, the bill has come due. I
Mhm.
mean, they're against animal testing just because they're anti-science. It's not because they
Right.
give a damn about animals. This is the guy who cut off a whale's head and brought it or whatever and put a dead bear cub in Central Park. I mean, this
Hmm.
guy he has some questionable ideas about animals as it is. Kristi Noem murdered her own dog. I mean, these are
Hmm.
crazy, dangerous people,
Yep.
and you don't put your stock in them,
Yeah.
right? But I remember White Coat Waste, right, had been organizing around this for some years, and it was an anti-vivisection organization. I haven't followed it. I think it's still doing the same thing, but it's from a right-wing kind of perspective, libertarian right-wing perspective. Again, we're under no obligation to hitch our wagon to any star that comes along or to look the other way when somebody is, say promoting animal rights, but also virulently racist. No, it's all a whole cloth. And the problem, Kimberly, as you know, is that people think in very simplistic terms a lot of the time, and their minds almost reel at complexity. The world
Yeah.
is not that. I mean, it's complex, but it you can understand it. Like,
Hmm.
and the idea that this Trump administration is very bad news for humans and animals alike is a very simple idea. So to say, well, I'm going to support these folks because they're going to end animal testing, again, I don't know. We agree. It just seems that some people are not thinking clearly. And
Yeah.
that in itself is frightening. What's happening to people's ability to think in a critical way.
Yes. Yeah. That I did an interview just a couple days ago with someone, and we were kind of talking about this idea of being able to think for yourself and how, like, where has critical thinking gone? Is it the internet that really, is it dumb? Are our phones really dumbing us down so much? And like, I think we could probably have a whole other conversation about all that stuff. But it is incredible how often it seems impossible for people to have a thought of their own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there was just an article in the New York Times Magazine a couple of weeks ago about ChatGPT, and one of the most terrifying things about that is not only that everybody is using it. I do not. I'm very much against any of that for a variety of reasons. It's not just that everybody is getting lazy and not doing the cognitive work of writing anymore, but it's that ChatGPT AI speak is now entering public discourse. So people are beginning to think and
Mm,
write like the AI. So the AI is simply, it's just a statistical extrapolation of previous work, and so it's a kind of averaging out of
mm,
norms of language and stuff, and now that's seeping into our own what should be our own organic consciousness and thinking and
mm,
writing, and that's really scary. Like we're becoming like the machines. The machines are becoming like us, supposedly. Not really, but so yeah.
yeah.
Anyway, very
Hmm.
cheerful.
I know. Well, I do appreciate the conversation for sure. And we have really touched on a lot of hard stuff,
Yes.
but we're also doing a lot of great things. Just the two of us. And
There you
then
go.
there are other people like us that are doing great things too. And so I lean on that when I start to feel so much despair. I remember I'm not the only one, even if we are a small number. And to meet someone like you who is really thinking about stuff is really helps make me feel more hopeful too.
Well, right at you, saying right to you. I mean, no, really and truly, it's a small community, but again, as someone who has studied this stuff for a long time, I really do believe we are right. I know we're right. We have truth and justice on our side. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
that is what the other side doesn't have. So
Right.
even if we have small numbers, then that's the basis, like a kernel of hope for a new civilization. That's how I think. I think what we're trying to do is create a new civilizational form, right? That
Yeah.
doesn't can't even really imagine, but we have to expand that, radiate outwards, uh, and these kinds of venues like your great podcast are helping with that. But we'd have to be sober about it, but not as you say, not give up hope. Absolutely. So thank you for this conversation, which I really enjoyed.
Yeah, me too. Thank you. Well, I've got one more question for you. I know we're right at the hour, so if you have another couple of minutes,
No, yeah, sure.
thank you. How does hummus show up in your life?
I love hummus and I make it at home. And it's only recently that I've had, you know, uh, some really authentic Middle Eastern hummus. And I'd have to tell you, the quality of hummus does vary out
Mm,
there.
yeah.
And it's like the perfect food. If anyone out there has not had hummus, you really should try it.
Yeah.
Uh, and I just discovered something new, which is I've been putting olive oil and za'atar on it.
Oh.
Za'atar is this traditional Middle Eastern spice, a combination of spices with sumac and sesame seeds, and dipping some nice fresh pita bread in that
Hmm.
or vegetables. Really, what could be better?
Nothing.
It's fun, right? People think that vegans are like ascetics who are, they deprive themselves of pleasure. My friend Marina Bolotnikova at Vox had a wonderful piece on, the abundance really that you encounter when you become a vegan, just
Hmm.
different kinds of food you didn't know existed. And it's endless how much wonderful stuff there is to eat. But I think
Yeah.
hummus, to answer your question, is definitely one of the great treats. And I love that you've organized or named your podcast after that.
Thank you. Yeah, full agreement. I love it. It is a perfect food, and I have it every chance I get.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Anyway,
John, thank you so much for this conversation. I know that my listeners are going to learn and be inspired, even if we also make them sad along the way.
sorry, have that effect on many people. Um, no, thank you again, Kimberly. It was a great conversation, and keep up the wonderful work you're doing.
Thank you. You
All
too.
right.
Welcome back. So, how will you be a better human? Maybe you could start by picking up John's book, The Omnivore's Deception. To connect with John, access his articles, essays, and interviews at johnsanbonmatsu.com. Also, visit the Clean Meat Hoax website at cleanmeat-hoax.com. You can follow John on Twitter at sanbonmatsuj and on Blue Sky at jsanbonmatsu.bsky.social. Of course, as always, the links will be in the show notes so you can click right in and get right there. I hope you found this episode helpful and inspiring. Please subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. And if you're loving it, please give Did You Bring the Hummus a 5-star rating and leave a review. It's an easy way to keep supporting the show. Be sure to share these episodes with your friends. If you're finding something good here, they will too. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Did You Bring the Hummus, and visit my website, didyoubringthehummus.com, for more information about me, updates on what I'm working on, new podcast episodes, and all things vegan. Tune in next time for my interview with Robin of People Farm. Thanks for listening.